A judge recently struck down the gay marriage ban known as Proposition 8 as being unconstitutional. But on May 26, 2009, the California Supreme Court said it wasn't unconstitutional. Voters to put that in the state constitution. Did this judge, Von Walker, essentially say the 7 state Supreme Court justices and the voters were wrong? Did he?
No, I think he looked at it from a different perspective. He looked at it from the U.S. Constitution, and specifically Article 14, the Equal Protection Clause and the Due Process Clause of the Constitution. The Supreme Court justices in California specifically were looking at, did the voters in California have a right to amend the Constitution the way they did? And in California, it's very easy to amend the state constitution. This was looked at from a federal perspective. It's a different standard, and this judge wasn't thumbing his nose at the Supreme Court in California. But we also have to remember, too, voters don't always get the last say in everything.
So do you think they were wrong?
Well, I do think that the voters were wrong.
Okay.
I think that the voters were misled. And, taking a vote on civil rights is never a good idea. And, you harken back to those years, particularly in the Loving years, and that where 90% of people were opposed to interracial marriage. If you took a poll on emancipation, if you took a poll on those type of rights over the years, you might not like what you had found back then. Okay. And so to not allow a court to step in, remember, we do have 3 branches of government in the United States, and everyone forgets that. You do have the legislative, you have the executive, and you have the courts, and the courts stand in to protect the minority. And right now, we're the minority.
Dr. Edmonds, do you think the judge overstepped his bounds and essentially said the 7 state Supreme Court justices were wrong and the voters were wrong? Do you think that's what he said?
That's what that's saying. I think he took it from the standpoint of a civil matter. Of course, the case was presented very ably, I would say that, and he looked at it from that standpoint. But I don't think that is in any way a statement that the voters were wrong. Voters vote their conscience. And since we're talking about the 14th Amendment, everyone has a right to vote as well, and to vote their conscience. So I don't think a person voting their conscience is wrong. Again, I will go back to saying what I've been saying, and I will reiterate that, and it seems to be sidestepped a lot here. The issue of a right from a civil standpoint and the issue relative to a person's individual moral beliefs, those are 2 separate issues here, and I think that this Proposition 8 is being somewhat weighed in the balance of those particular 2 issues. I would like to ask Bill. Bill, you said, and since we've been talking about the Loving case, and you brought that up quite frequently concerning interracial couples not being allowed to marry, then they were allowed to be married. What do you see as the distinction between that case and this case relative to same-sex couples being married? What are the distinctions there instead of the similarities?
I don't think there are distinctions. I think the fact of the matter is you had racial restrictions across color lines were abolished, and you had people making the same arguments that back then they said that they would degrade and devalue marriage. And I think the fact of the matter is that there is really no distinction. Here you have another class based on sexual orientation. So you just insert sexual orientation for racial. And I think there isn't a distinction. And I think it's very instructive in this case, and I think this is where the court is going. And in fact, the judge stated that there is no state interest in preventing gays from marrying. And that's key, and that goes to the Equal Protection Clause, and that case was decided on equal protection.
Well, I know, but to insert that in lieu of race would be basically overlooking the differences here. The differences are, Bill, is that those particular couples in the Loving case, that particular case was based on a racial issue. And the racial issue was centered having the rights afforded to others to be married. That is not so in the case of same-sex marriage. That's why it's called same-sex marriage. Why is it called same-sex marriage? That means two people of the same gender are married or are together and want to be married and want to actually have the same rights as those who are of opposite sex. Now, I think this is more of a petition for rights that are to be added more so than a civil right matter. And if you judge it yourself, you would see it that very same way. I mean, there are things that we do desire, but it doesn't necessarily make it so that it is an inalienable right. I think that a woman has an inalienable right to be married based on, and you keep shirking that, but procreation is a very important factor here.
And I'm going to break in. We have a Facebook posting from Esther Belzeal. She says, I heard Ted Olson on Fox News Sunday argue that marriage is a fundamental right for all, but marriage has always been restricted. Children can't marry, polygamy is banned, one can't marry an animal, etc. Once a nation loses its strong family base, it crumbles from within. So what would you tell?
Well, what I would say is that if you allow gays and lesbians to marry, you actually strengthen the institution of marriage. You bring two people committed into a household that love each other as opposed to being single or on their own or dating multiple people. You have two in a loving relationship, married and able to raise children. They can adopt children. They have efficiencies of household. It's always been shown that individuals who are married tend to have higher incomes, tend to have better health, tend not to smoke or drink as much. These are all things that benefit society. Not only does it benefit those individuals because they're married and they love each other and they're together, but it benefits society. It has such great economic and cultural, wonderful to see families together in a park.
And Dr. Edmonds, how do you respond to that? Our Facebook message and bill saying that it strengthens our whole society.
I vehemently disagree with that. There are elements within any relationship that prove to be contributions to our society in a beneficial way and not a detrimental way. So, but when you look at same-sex marriage, let's take it from this standpoint. Let's just say that same-sex marriage is accepted by everyone in the United States of America, and everyone decides to be married with a person of the same sex. Then we would have to look at this, that there would not be an increase in population because there is no procreation there. There would be a mindset that two males or two women engaged together in marriage, sexually or otherwise, relative to that, is acceptable all the way across the board, and there is no other side to that. I think both sides have to be examined, and it is detrimental in a certain way, because there may be those who are not inclined to embrace this particular belief and are entrenched within their moral position or religious position or the way that their parents have brought them up in church or what have you. And because of this, they will accept this as being true.
And I'm going to ask Bill to respond to that because I'm still hearing both of you, one fundamental and you from a Christian perspective. So I want to hear Bill's response.
Well, you know, the fact of the matter is that the fact that I got married has not impacted anyone. I very well doubt that the fact that I got married 2 years ago, a whole group of people across California said, geez, you know, Bill got married and 18,000 couples got married. You know what? I'm a heterosexual. That's it. I'm not getting married. And you know, and also going back to the fact of children, you know, you don't have to be married to have children. And many people do have children and are not married. So that's a whole other issue for people of religion. But the fact of the matter is that we do have separation of church and state in this country. And what if we were to allow just sort of the Mormon church to rule? And they decided that everything had to be according to Mormon scripture. I don't think a lot of individuals in Pasadena would find that very comfortable if they were told, well, you know what, you have to go by our set of standards for weddings, or you have to go by our set of standards for prayer, or should we teach the Book of Mormon in public schools? I don't think we would find that acceptable. And that might be bringing it to an extreme, but the reality is that's why we do have a separation of church and state. We celebrate our religious diversity, but we also celebrate our cultural diversity, and there's also diversity in sexual orientation. And that doesn't have to be taught. It just exists. It's existed for years and will continue to exist.
What do you think should happen to those marriages?
Well, first of all, the 18,000 marriages had been ruled previously by the court that they are constitutional, that they are, that was not even a subject of the Perry versus Schwarzenegger. So these 18,000 marriages have been ruled constitutional, have been ruled legal, and those have held for the past 2 years. Those are not even in jeopardy. Now the question is, does the stay get lifted and do we start gay marriage again? And the judge will be deciding that. He's been hearing arguments. He heard a lot of arguments. I think on Friday he's taken written briefs, and I believe probably within the next few days he'll probably announce a decision because this obviously has been appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be back here with Bill Hacket on set and Dr. J. Edmonds on the phone talking about Prop 8. Stay tuned. CCN Crown City News, your neighborhood. Don't go away.